up everyone? Welcome to Drummer's Perspective. My name is Ben Todd and I'm here to help broaden your scope of what's possible as a drummer. Thank you so much for checking out the video today, whether you're watching here on YouTube or you're just listening on the podcast. I really appreciate you wherever you're coming in from. If you are here on YouTube though, please subscribe to the channel. Hit that like button, that definitely helps me out. Today, I'm super excited to bring you a conversation with two of my oldest drumming friends, and that's Angus Mason and Joel Prime. Now, Joel, Angus, and I all come from the same city of Adelaide in Australia. We all went through the same music high school within a few years of each other, so therefore we all grew up with a lot of the same influences, same drum teachers, and ended up playing a lot of the same bands. Since leaving high school though, all of our careers went on slightly different paths to the point now where Angus is living and working as a musician in New York and Joel is doing the same in London. And currently, I'm on tour here in Japan. I thought it'd be really fun to jump on a call with these two guys and ask what it was like to move from a relatively small city to the amazing music cities that London and New York are. What was that process like? What was difficult? What was exciting? What was challenging? What the similarities and differences are between London and New York and the process of getting established and now the expectations in the music scene. Most importantly though, I'm really keen to hear their advice for other drummers who are considering moving to a new city from their hometown, whether that be a London, a New York, or any city for that matter. So, thank you once again for being here. Please sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Angus Mason in New York and Joel Prime in London. Before we jump into today's conversation, I want to offer you a free gift, and today that's my 7 ways to attract more work as a drummer PDF guide. If you feel like you're working on all the right things as a drummer, you're seeing some improvement in your playing, perhaps you're quite established in your music scene, but you just aren't out there working as much as you would like to, then this guide is perfect for you. Here I offer 7 ways for you to reapproach your trajectory as a drummer and give you a fresh perspective on how you might be able to attract more work as a musician in general. Best thing about this guide is that only one of the tactics involves picking up a pair of drumsticks at all. So, if you want to get out of your rut, get out of that feeling of being a little bit stuck and just look for some fresh approaches to realign where you're going as a drummer and as a musician in general, then please head to drummersperspective.com/7ways and grab that free downloadable PDF guide right now. Angus Mason, Joel Prime, thank you guys so much for taking some time today to sit down and chat with me. I've been really looking forward to not only having this conversation about what I think is going to be a really interesting talk, but just to see you guys again. It's been a long time since I've actually the three of us have spoken at all. So thank you guys. This is really, really fun. I'm really glad we're able to find a time zone that eventually worked for all of us in New York and London and Osaka. So yeah, this is great. So I feel like we could talk about so many different things, but in general, I really wanted to talk to you guys both at the same time because I thought it'd be really interesting to hear your stories and kind of your journey and how you got established moving from Adelaide, which we're all from, relatively small town in Australia, to these incredible music cities, huge cities that you guys are in now, and hear some of the similarities and differences about the realities of living in both of these cities, and like I said, your journey and some of the logistical practical things that you guys deal with now, and how they kind of compare, and hopefully give some drummers out there some inspiration and advice if they're thinking about moving to not only London or New York, but any city in particular, and what some things they can think about are. I guess I'll just start off by saying you guys have done something that I think is a lot of drummers and a lot of musicians think about doing, but never actually take action on it for whatever reason, and that's to move to a new city and reestablish yourself to pursue music, which is super admirable, and I have a lot of respect for you guys for doing that. So right off the bat, this is a really cool thing that you guys are living. And I'll start off by, I guess, asking the question, I know you both kind of moved for different reasons, but was there one particular thing in the beginning that made you think I really want to move to like London, or I really want to move to New York? Like, was there something that like triggered you, or like an interaction or a conversation, or anything like that? Or was it kind of a slow process? So, Angus, we'll start with you.
Yeah. I feel like for me, New York was always somewhere where I wanted to end up, from like the age of, I don't know, like 14 or 15, just because it seemed like all of the records and drummers that I loved were kind of coming out of New York. So that was always on my radar. And then for me, like I moved to New York to go to school. So I went to Manhattan School of Music, and I think that was initially a big factor so that I could study with John Riley. Just having him because he actually came to Adelaide. You guys were still there, right? I can't remember how long ago that was, but maybe like 2009 or 2008. And yeah, just being able to hear him play and like hear him do a masterclass and stuff, I was like, oh wow, this is really great. So that kind of maybe planted the seeds. And then seeing, we should also say we all went to the same school. Yes. Which is, but I think, that school kind of brought a few bands over to the US and went to New York, and then everyone was kind of raving about how good the city was then. And so, then just as I got older and did my undergraduate degree in Adelaide, more and more people were kind of saying that it was a place that you should go and spend time and go and check out. And then I think I did my first visit here was 2015, and then from there I was like, okay, I want to move here. It's awesome. Just the amount of drummers here that are like crazy good is something that I'm really excited by, and it's not just, a lot of the drummers are people that, a lot of people will never know, but they're just like incredible. And then just being around that type of drum culture, I feel like was really good for me. So yeah, I did my master's, and I finished in 2020, and I was all set to kind of stay. And then, a global pandemic happened. So I went back home, but, it was always like that was an interim thing. So I moved back in 2022. So that was, why New York? It's kind of hard to say, but it's always been something for me.
Yeah, cool. Oh, fair enough, man. That makes a lot of sense. And I do remember when we did those school trips, going to New York and being like just, amazed by the energy there. And, the small glimpse that we saw of the music scene was just like super inspiring. But yeah, like I said, you took that step to jump across and actually like relocate, which, yeah, super great, man.
Yeah. That's hard.
Yeah, of course. Like, there's one thing to think about and then to actually do it. But that's why, I wanted to do this chat and hear like the kind of the nitty gritty of those decisions and that what that process was like for you. But it sounds like it's a long period of time, which of course it makes sense. You don't just wake up one day and be like, I'm going to move to New York, tomorrow, or London tomorrow. But yeah, what was it for you, Jolie? I know you had some kind of connection with London for a while, but what was the thing? Was there any like particular moment that you thought like, I'm committing to this idea?
Well, yeah, it was kind of a long decision for me. I wanted, similar to Angus's reasoning, I guess. It was just a way to push myself, and like extend myself and challenge myself. So yeah, it's a daunting kind of process, and it was either going to be for me, like a big move like this, or like a lot of people are moving to Melbourne, and that was a way of progressing their career. And for me, I decided just one day I was just going to book a one-way ticket. It was just booked the flight. I can't say no. I've spent the money. That's it. And it's happening. So yeah, that was my reasoning. And then of course you start to tell people, right, I'm going to do this. Once you make that commitment, you're kind of giving your work away in a sense. So it's like, okay, there's no going back. But yeah, I guess the reasoning for me was, in the end, the way I convinced myself was, I was with myself for a couple of years, see how it went. I mean, worst case scenario, I could always come back to Adelaide, and kind of settle back in. But yeah, so it's been what, 10 years this year, so which is crazy to think about. But.
Wow, man. I guess that's the thing for us. Like we were all kind of pretty established in Adelaide, doing our thing and playing gigs and things like that. So we had a pretty comfortable base to go from, which, is good in some ways. Like it is a bit of a security blanket, to make the decision to move and do something else. But, at the same time, like you say, sometimes what it takes is just like, either booking that one-way ticket or you start to make it a reality by telling other people, and that can, once you hear yourself saying it to other people, that can help you, make it more of a reality for yourself as well. But absolutely. Speaking about like Adelaide, where we're all from, it's a relatively small city in Australia, and I'm curious, like for you guys, did you ever feel like overwhelmed or intimidated at the thought of, going from this little bubble to the places that you are now? Like Angus, you mentioned like the just amount of crazy good drummers that there are. I'm assuming that you had an idea that there'd be a lot of good musicians there, but like, did you realize the scope of it? And then what was that like once you actually got there and realized like, oh wow, there's a lot of great players that plays.
Yeah. I think for me, the thing was when I first moved, I was 25, and I would hear like 17-year-olds play the drums, and that sounded ridiculously good. And it was like, that realization was like, oh wow, there is like no excuse to not be really good at your instrument, or like something like that. So that was definitely pretty mind blowing. But I think actually, I was really, really lucky growing up, because there, even though Adelaide's like a smaller scene, there are some really great, yourselves included, there are some great drummers that I could go and see. And then some people were kind of coming through and touring when I was younger as well. So I think in a way that was like part of it was being able to see really high level music in Adelaide, and having a few people kind of be like, yeah, well, this, if you enjoy that, you should go here. Because it wasn't, I mean, the first time, I saw some mind-blowing gigs and I saw my heroes and stuff, but it wasn't as, I feel like it wasn't as big of a shock, because there was maybe this, level of, I've seen really high quality music before. So that was maybe a little bit of a thing, but it definitely, it's the more shocking aspects were just like the day-to-day life of here from Adelaide. It's a vastly different place.
Yeah. Just like the city itself, like the reality of that. Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
right.
Massive. And just, I mean, like there's a lot of logistics that I would imagine that Joel is pretty familiar with. Like I can see, Joel, you're in like a practice space, but back home, like, a lot of people practice at home or at your house. And I found during the pandemic, when I went back, I was trying to find like a space to play that wasn't in my house, and it was kind of impossible. Whereas over here, I mean, right now I have like a tiny shoebox closet with just a set of drums, and that's where I practice. So things like that, I think, would be, if people are considering moving to another place, bigger cities, it's really hard to practice at home. Everyone lives in an apartment, so just logistically, like, you have to find a place to play, or you have to get really used to just playing on a practice pad, and then only touching your cymbals when you have a session with someone else, or you go to a jam session and stuff like that. It's where we were like really lucky back home to grow up in like a place that had a lot of space, and you could
totally
play in like a shed or something, for ages. So
that's something I really did want to talk to you guys about, and that is like the reality of firstly, like equipment when you first arrived, like what you did for that, and then like practice facilities, because I think like you mentioned, we didn't really realize how great we had it when we were kids, you know, had a house and a drum space and whatever, you know. But even like me coming on tour, like I have my drums on stage and that's it, you know. Like if I want to practice, I got to like schedule time to do it, or I've got to like have an electric kit in the room or practice pads or whatever, like, you know. But like Jolie, you've got your new completely soundproof studio built at your house, you know, which is like,
oh, awesome.
You know, that's a dream, man, where you can go and play there anytime. But I'm sure it wasn't like that from the beginning, right? Like what was the reality like for you?
Yeah, this has been kind of a long time in the works and so forth. But yeah, well, I mean, certainly when I arrived, it was like some cymbals, one set of cymbals and a snare drum. And that was it. And the reality was, I was had to find an apartment to live in, shared house. So yeah, sharing with a few other people. So you literally, you've got a room. You don't even have a lounge room or anything, you know. So it's either going to be practice pad or silent heads, mesh heads, or you know, even low volume cymbals to an extent are too loud in some of those settings. So so that's certainly a big challenge. I mean, the first step is just finding some gear, which, I mean, it's easy enough to do in a big city. But certainly practice space is really difficult. Like a lot of people will share practice spaces here. So they'll find a little studio, or they'll set up a little studio somewhere sort of close to their house, or might be like an industrial estate or something like that. And similarly to your situation in a way, they'll have to book out time. You might be sharing with not only drummers, but it might be, you know, like horn players or whatever, and you might share with 2, 3, 4 other people.
Yeah, sure.
Your slot when you want to be able to use it, and that's when you practice, basically. Yeah,
you definitely have to learn how to focus your time much better. You know, I remember before I moved, I would be like, well, I have the whole day to play the drums, so I'll like play for a little bit, have a cup of coffee, go on Instagram, listen to music, I'll play some drums. Yeah, now it's like, well, you've got 2 hours, you know, you have to make it work. Like
that's super cool though. That must add to like the energy of being there, you know, when like it is such a change in your practice schedule. It must make you like really switch on and focus your like I say, focus your attention and time and really get the most out of, you know, those couple of hours that you can, because it's either that or nothing.
Exactly. Also, it's actually changed my practice habits now, because I haven't been able to shed at home for a while. And so now when I, you know, do have the opportunity to like set up, you know, a snare and a bass drum and some cymbals and stuff at home, I find that I actually practice, or have been practicing less, because now it's like I have to commit to getting on the train for 30 to 40 minutes, going to my space. It's like just that act of leaving the house to go and do something, I find is, even if I don't have like a really productive practice session, I'm still going to go and touch the drums for 2 hours because I've left the house, you know, like, so in some ways that has been beneficial for me, because it's like, you know, every day I'm going to do this work. It's not, or ideally every day. Sometimes, you know, it's just a practice pad and stuff, but, just having that kind of thing where it's like, okay, well, you have to do this now that you're here. You know, you could just sit in a tiny dark room and scroll on your phone, or you could actually do something. So,
that's cool, you know, you once you have that realization though, it's kind of like, it reminds me of like, you know, going to the gym or going for a run. Like if you get out the door and you make that commitment, like you're going to do something, you know.
Yeah, that's half the battle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But that's super interesting. So Angus, I know you mentioned in the beginning you moved for school, but now like you're more looking to get into like the scene itself and do more gigs and things like that. So I'll ask you both, but like Angus, we'll start with you. Like, did you have a plan like the second time going back, when you did just want to focus on playing like did you have a plan to like get more involved in the scene, or did you try and make connections beforehand, or were you just, you know, relying on the connections that you made in school, or how did that kind of work for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of both. I was really lucky that a lot of the friends that I made in school were now kind of gigging a lot more. I mean, I hadn't seen them in like 2 years, but my close friends are, you know, working a lot. And I had like a really strong group of drumming friends as well that they actually also helped me out a lot when I moved back, which was super nice. But I mean, basically I had one of the lessons that I learned at school, and I'm sure they wouldn't mind me giving this away, was writing a list of people that I really want to play with, and then kind of having some spirals of people that they play with, and then kind of doing this web until it leads back to, well, I've played with this bass player before, so let's play a session with them and do that. So I think the biggest difference, and I'm sure Joel might have a similar thing, is, you know, back in Australia, if you're good, the work will come. Like that's that. It's not even the whole country isn't really big enough to have to hustle that hard. I think here it's like there is literally thousands of drummers that can do the job as good, if not better, than you. So you have to have, in some ways, it's like you have to actually be more direct in what you're bringing to the music. And so, yeah, here, and it's also really hard, I think, for Australians as well, because we're really, we can be a little bit too, you know, not, maybe it's like a throwback to some British sensibilities, but we can be really nice and humble, and not that being humble is a bad thing, but I think here I'm trying to learn how to just be like, yes, this is what I do. I'm good at it. Let's play again. You know, like that. And there's a very fine line of the hustle, which is like annoying, and, you know, just trying to network and you know, get more work for yourself. And it, you know, it's like Joel was saying, like a couple, you know, give yourself a couple of years. I'm giving myself like 4 years, honestly, because I've been here now for 8 months, and yeah, I'm starting to work a little bit more and play with some people that I really like. But it's, you know, it's such a big city, and it would be, I think you need to give yourself at least 2 to 4 years to really have a feeling of can you make it last here.
Sure, man. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, just it's a patience game, you know. It would be tricky to, I'm just imagining, like, you're moving to a city, you have all this excitement and all this hype of like being there, and you finally made the commitment, and then remembering like, I got to stick this out, you know, for a long time before I, you know, start to doubt whether this has been worth it or not. So kudos to you for trying it, man, and sticking with it. But yeah, so Jolie, what about you, man? Did you try and make like connections before you went away, or did you have people already that you were hoping to play with?
Yeah, well, I had there's a couple of, probably 1 or 2 people from Adelaide actually who sort of lived in London for a while, or who were sort of been here for a couple of years, or even a couple of like you know, Australian drummers and whatever. I talked to Darren Ferrugia because he lived in London for a little while, and just trying to get as many contacts or people to sort of catch up with us as I could and get a sense of the experience, really. Because of course you're coming here with just completely fresh, you know, you're not knowing anyone. So sometimes it's a case of, right, where do I start? I looked at studying over here as well. I did like an audition for one of the schools for like a master's degree, which in the end I turned down. It was going to be to international fees. So basically that was one thing. I mean, I'm sure Angus is like, you know, especially being US, well aware of that. But yeah, initially they were like, right, here it is. Like, you can come study here if you want. It's going to be going to be £20,000 for the year. Plus, you're going to have to pay for living expenses on top of that. But so I kind of discounted that. As well, I talked to some drummers as well, like previously, and they good piece of advice I got, because I studied for 4 years sort of prior to that in Adelaide, and they said, like, you could go and study. It's a great way of networking and meeting people, but just be aware that, like, if you're looking to like get onto that scene, it's like people will view you as a student in some cases. Like if you're go and immediately start studying, you know, like there are some serious players that are, if you can play or not, they're still going to think of you as like, right, well, you're a student rather than like a professional player. So yeah, that kind of affected that decision. And so for me, it was just trying to get out as much as I can and get some sessions. But yeah, I didn't so much have a plan of, you know, people who I wanted to play with, although that's like a great idea. It's sort of great to hear that perspective. It's definitely something I'll start to check out, I think. At this stage.
Yeah. I mean, no one's ever asked, I'm sure, any of you for a gig and then said, well, can I see your degree? That might be a controversial statement, but you know, it's if you can do it, then
that's a big thing, man. That's a big thing for sure. I mean, pros and cons to both approaches, definitely. But that's why this is really interesting, because you're both kind of coming at these cities from a different perspective. But yeah, I'm curious to know now, like, that you've been there for a little while, and you know, in the first, you know, a few months of establishing yourself, I think the common kind of approach when someone's moving to a new city is just to do the typical, like, get out, go and see gigs, try and meet people, introduce yourself, that kind of thing, which I'm sure is still valid. And, you know, you guys correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure it's still valid, but I wonder now how much of that has changed with the, you know, introduction of social media just being everywhere and being able to like message people and check out people on Instagram and Facebook. Like, do you think it's still as important to be physically out there going to the gigs and jams, or are you discovering people and meeting people online, you know, through those kind of platforms?
I think getting out and meeting people in person is definitely important, because it's as much about your personality as well as your playing in a way.
Sure.
Half the gig usually is hanging out with people and then, you know, rather than playing. So yeah, and also just people want to know that you're genuine in a way. You know, social media is great, and you can certainly get a sense of people's playing in a way, but especially.
Wait, are you implying, Joel, that like social media, some people on social media aren't who they come across? Is that what you say?
Never.
No. Okay.
Okay. But yeah,
I think. Sorry, go on, Joel.
Angus, yeah.
Well, I think there's a big difference between being a social media musician and a actual, gigging musician. And both can be, you know, really, really valid and used for one and the other. But I think in New York, like, people still want to hear you play for longer than 60 seconds. and you know, there's a lot of things on the gig that, you know, require different things. Having said that, it is an excellent tool that I think people need to, it's like here to stay, and you have to utilize that. There's no doubt about that. But I think, it's like like Joel said, you have to be likable as a person, and people want to, you know, actually sitting behind the drums and playing the gig is like, you know, 50% of actually getting the gig. If you rock up on time, have looked at the music, you know, are not a, you know, really difficult person to work with, you probably get called again.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean that's something that meeting people. I agree with Joel. I still think it's really important to go out and have, because also we're kind of struggling maybe from a little bit of just like social media fatigue or Instagram drumming fatigue, where it's like everyone sounds amazing on there. So I know for myself, I'm less and less like, whoa, I've just seen this amazing person on Instagram. I need to follow them. It's like, yeah, it's kind of harder to find unless you have like a big gimmick or something that's like going to make you be remembered. It's kind of harder to do that. So going out is still just as important.
For me, I have like a lot more kind of admiration in a way when I like if I see someone on social media and they're amazing, it's great. But if you see that done live, if you see it done in person, on the bandstand, it's like, okay, wow, it's genuine in that case. It's like, right,
absolutely.
There's no retakes or second chances in that moment. And I think from there, then social media has more relevance.
Absolutely.
It's used as like,
okay,
it back for sure. It backs up like what you've seen, in a live situation. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, cool. That's very interesting. I guess now I want to ask like something on a more like practical level of like when you are playing gigs, in both of these cities, what is the equipment situation like? Like, do most venues have house kits? Are you expected to bring your own gear, and what is that? And like, how are you getting around? Like, if you are bringing your own gear, like, are you like lugging it on the subway, or getting buses, or how's that working?
Angus, I'm keen to hear your perspective.
Most places here, most places do have house kits, so it's just bringing your cymbals, which I just bought a new cymbal bag last week, and I'm going to be using like a sack truck for that because my back is beginning to be absolutely wrecked from carrying around. I mean, I only have 2 rides and a set of hats and my stick bag, but it's like you walk a lot here, so wheeling them is going to be better for me. And then on the off chance that there isn't a house kit, I have it's a really pretty massive pain, but I have a bass drum and a snare drum on a sack truck, and then a suitcase with my hardware, and then my cymbals on my back. And I'll try and find the closest wheelchair accessible subway station because they have an elevator, and try and plan my route around that. But that is I have done that quite a few times, and it's not great.
Not pleasant.
Yeah.
I can only imagine, man. Yeah. I mean, again, like growing up where we grew up, and we all had cars and loading docks and stuff. It's just something you don't really think about. But now you're in that reality of subway, life. That's a whole different thing. What about you, Jolie? Like, what are the venues like in London?
It can be a bit hit and miss in London. There's certainly quite a few venues that will have like house equipment, house gear, but so I find myself, if I'm working in central London, just bringing cymbals, sticks, snare for one.
Sure.
And the transport system's pretty good, although you're still walking a lot. But I found myself, I had to get a car after a few months here.
Yeah.
And surprisingly, I found myself working outside of London as much as I was in London. So kind of opened the door up to other gigs as well.
Sure. I guess that's a really interesting like comparison between the two cities. Then, like, obviously, like, are you in Manhattan, Angus? You like?
I live in Brooklyn.
Okay, cool. So, like, having a car is not really like an option as such, or like a necessity as such.
I mean, it's not a necessity, but similar to Joel, it's definitely something that I would like to do in the next couple of years. Because not only that, like, sometimes there is, corporate work out of the city, and I have to bring drums. And at the moment, it's like, well, I'm having to try and find a ride from someone else. And especially for, I mean, this is very New York specific, but a lot of the scene now is based in Brooklyn, and the subway transiting in Brooklyn can sometimes be massive pain. Like you have to go into Manhattan and then back out again. And having a car would trim off, 30 minutes of that commute, more even. So that's something that is on my radar. Having said that, parking is near impossible.
Yeah.
We'll see. Well, maybe in a year I'll have a car. I'm not sure yet. I'm making it work now, but yeah.
But that's a really interesting, thing to think about, because as I said, we kind of grew up and not really thinking about it, but the reality is for you guys now, like it's something you do have to actually consider, especially if you're going to like establish yourself there and really commit to being there for a long time. It might be something worth investing in. But yeah, it kind of leads me on to the next thing. Like Angus, you mentioned you'd be there for about 8 months now, and Joel, you said 10 years almost. Is it? Yeah. Wow. So for both of you, do you feel like was there a point where when you started to make connections outside of your circle that you thought like, okay, this is a moment that's been worth it, to move, and once you've started to break out of like the little bubble or network that you might have established in the beginning, and you start getting these outside kind of gig offers or playing opportunities from people that you didn't know when you moved there, was that kind of a moment of validation of like, I think this is, starting to work and this has kind of been worth it? Joel, maybe start with you.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I was kind of lucky enough to, when I guess a few months after I got here, to pick up a jam session gig, being in like a house band, which was quite cool. And that meant we'd have like a guest player every week, which was usually, quite a like heavy band leader in town. And so that was like great for me just to get my name out there a little bit and meet some people. I guess it's a moment when you get a call from someone, like you played a gig like that, they've just seen you play, and you get a call from someone to maybe start a new project. They're putting something together of their own original material, and they want you to be a part of it. Which it's a good feeling, because it's like they've brought me out. They've had me in mind for something they're passionate about. So I guess that's the moment for me.
Yeah, cool. Angus?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, it's just when like this playing sessions is like a big part of the culture here. So it's like when you walk away from.
Maybe just explain like what sessions are to.
Well, yeah, like, I mean, there's a jam session, right? So that would be like at a bar, but a session would be, hey, I've met this person, got their number. It's, actually today in an hour, I'm going to go play with 2 other people in their private space. And it's just like, and then I think walking away from them and try, like playing, there's been a few people that I've met where I'm like, oh, wow, this person is really special. And I feel like we have a strong connection playing together. And then it's like, yeah, kind of, and even working with younger people as well. Like I'm yet to kind of play. That's my goal at the moment, is kind of play with some older, more established musicians. But it's like playing with people of my own generation is like, oh, wow, nobody knows this person now, but hopefully they will. And hopefully I'll be on the gig, because we're developing like a deep friendship and musical relationship. So yeah, it's like when you walk away from one of those sessions and you're like, wow, that was like 2 hours of really beautiful music making.
Yeah.
And, a gig might come from that, or even just some recordings and stuff. So it's definitely, I mean, I don't know. I don't even know if I had like a circle of musos that I played with more when I first moved, but it's more just like every week I'm trying to play with new people and meeting new people and just expanding that.
So was that kind of like, would you say that those kind of experiences and interactions were like something that, helped drive you when you were having potentially moments of like wondering whether it was worth it, like meeting new people, like was it kind of inspiring to like stick it out and look for next interaction?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like New York is when it's bad here, it's like the worst place on earth. Like it's not really it's not really an awesome city at sometimes. I think I really love it here, not just because of the music. Like I like the whole energy and the culture and stuff, but when it's bad, it's horrible. Mm-hmm. And yeah, there's definitely been like, even when I was living here previously, there's like multiple times where it's like, what am I doing here? And then yeah, just like playing 2 hours of music was like, well, that's why I live here. Like, I don't think I could get that. Well, I definitely couldn't get that back in Australia. So it's like, yeah, this is the place where that is happening. And I remember like, for me, like going back home for a bit during the pandemic and realizing like, oh, there's like, like 5 bass players that I play with in Australia regularly. And that's kind of it, and it's like, wow, well here there's just like there's so many musicians, which maybe like, I don't know if this would lead to the point, but actually like I would say, if anyone's thinking about moving to a bigger city, it's the advice that I would have is you actually need to be less broad as a musician. Like back home, it's like you if you want to work, you have to be really good at everything, or like kind of you can be able to do that stuff. Here, it's like I feel like you're almost forced to be more direct in, and that doesn't mean like, oh, I'm going to be like a bebop guy, or I'm going to, be the avant-garde free person. I mean it less like that. I mean like really pick some things that interest you, and like that's what you're going to offer musically. So it's more like you can't take, or you just won't get gigs that aren't in your wheelhouse, because there is inevitably someone else who will do a better job, because that's what they've picked to do.
That's really interesting, because it kind of goes against a lot of like what we're brought up with, in terms of like drum education and music education, and what we're kind of told is what you need to be a great drummer is to just be versatile and be able to do everything. Which I think has its place, but like that's really interesting like experience to hear from yourself, who's actually living there and realizing that like it pays to actually be a little bit more like specific and specialized in a certain area. Yeah. Do you find that too, Joel? Like, is that something that you resonate with?
Yeah. I mean, certainly when you first get here, it helps to have like a knowledge, like a broad knowledge of like a number of different styles and what have you, because you don't want to say no to anything, basically.
Yeah, of course.
And I'm sure Angus will sympathize with that. It comes in and you take it. But as you kind of in the city longer, you do realize that like people do specialize in certain styles or certain ways of playing, and they're very good at it. And if like a gig or a session comes up, then they're going to be the first call or for that kind of style, because that's their focus. They are so good at it. I mean, in reality, there's just not enough time in a lifetime to study everything.
Exactly.
Sure. Yeah. And I think a lot of this is like obviously like based on population to some degree. There's just obviously a lot more people in the cities that you guys are in versus I'm just like thinking of Adelaide, where like you do want to try and be able to do whatever gig comes in, just because there's not that many gigs in comparison and not that many people to play with. But like, yeah, you guys are in big cities where there's a lot of drummers who are very good at specific things. So yeah, it's cool to hear like, because we all came up with that same mentality of like just trying to be great at doing a whole bunch of different stuff, and you guys are getting like more focused in what you are doing now. And I got to say, like, not just to pamper you guys or whatever, but like you are sounding phenomenal. Like the stuff that I hear you guys play, like both of you are just like absolutely killing it. So yeah, little tip, if you guys don't check out, haven't checked these guys playing, go check it out. We'll get to your social media following things at the end, but yeah, for now, like just wanted to give a little shout out for that. But so I want to ask too, like what's been something that's been like particularly surprising about like the standards of the music scene, like in comparison to somewhere like Australia, like like how much free work is expected, or how quickly do you get paid, or like in New York, how much of like a payment thing is based off of tips, or is that a thing in London, and are you expected to help with everyone's gear? Like what's been like, just something that's been interesting, like, oh, this is not what I'm used to, like gig wise or scene wise. Yeah, Joel, I don't know if you got any thoughts on that.
Initially, travel time is huge, especially compared to like Adelaide. I mean, I can recall thinking half an hour, 45 minutes to a gig is a long time, and that's like a big time out your day, and that's certainly changed here. When you're working in other cities, I mean, I've driven 5 hours for a gig or more. Wow. And that's kind of like accepted sometimes, and pay wise, I think it's comparable to Australia, which is quite nice. I mean, cost of living is arguably more here, but hard to say. I think Australia's still quite expensive. Anywhere in the world at the moment is getting to that stage.
Yeah, sure.
But as far as like expectations, I'm not sure. Just, I mean, you're expected to obviously know the music when you rehearse, and all the same musical expectations as you would back home. But I think it's just that travel thing for me. It's just you sometimes it's going to be like an entire day, or maybe you stay overnight and whatever for a gig, or even just one set sometimes.
Wow, man, that's very interesting. Yeah. What about you, Angus? Anything pop up that
travel times as well? Definitely would agree. Like, half an hour to a gig is like awesome. You know what I mean? Like, now that's like, wow, that's so close.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, I mean, the pay thing here, there are still quite a lot of gigs where you get tips, and there are some like prominent clubs that you would think would pay you really well, and they don't pay you that well. I think that's one thing that is not great about New York, is like you can work 7 nights a week for sure, but you won't be living like a lavish life because it's because it is so competitive. I think venues can kind of get away with paying you less. So sometimes people might be playing 2-3 gigs in a day.
Wow.
But having said that, I think most people I know here have some type of side hustle as well. I think, and this is maybe a broader picture of a global thing, but more and more it's kind of becoming difficult to just be like a gigging musician, unless you're doing like Broadway stuff or things like that, which is like a whole other thing. But just freelancing, I think that's becoming more and more difficult. Considering here, like gigs pay comparable to what they did 20 years ago, and rent is not what it was 20 years ago, and all that type of stuff. So
sure.
I mean, however people do that, like I teach a bit, and some people, I know people that do like video editing. I know people that work in cafes, and that just facilitates like a lifestyle where I think when you're having to worry about making money from doing the gigs, it can kind of really shift your perspective of like how you're 100%. Doing music,
100%.
That's something, and I mean, this is a beneficial thing that I've noticed here compared to back home. Like, it was kind of shocking, is that people just, I think, are more professional in the way that they, like when you've hired someone for a gig, if they mess up the part, that's it. It will not be messed up again, and there's like a level of expectation of, if you can't play something, you will go home and shed that, because if you don't, then you've lost the gig for sure. And I think maybe back home it's a little bit easier to kind of, you know, get away with like, it's fine, she'll be right, you know, that type of thing. So
sure.
I was kind of shocked by that in a really good way.
Great.
Yeah,
that's cool. That's great stuff.
I think you get that sense of playing with new people as well all the time. It's kind of like every time you're playing with someone new, it's kind of like an audition, right? It's they don't know what you can do, and you know, neither you of them. You know, if you play with the same people for years on end, you know, you can get complacent after a while. You know, there's that danger of like, oh well, I wasn't 100% today, but you know, they know what I can do, and so that's fine. You know,
totally.
Certainly keeps you on your toes when you're like, right, I don't know who this person is, but they can play, and I've got to try and, you know, certainly give 100% today, because, you know, who knows what could come of this, or
That's super interesting. Yeah, I'm just like, thinking back now to all of us coming from Adelaide and the people that we got to play with there. Like, we kind of, you know, once you get through, you know, university and you start to do gigs, like, you pretty quickly get an idea of who like the great players are in town. And you know, if you're any good, you start to play with those people, and then that's kind of the network, which is cool. Like, it's great in its own little way, but now, like, you guys, like I said, are moving and living in these places where you can meet literally new musicians like every day, and, you know, play with one guy or one girl once and then not see them for months, and then they're off, you know, being busy, and you're off being busy, and then you come back together, and that kind of thing. Like, it would be hard to kind of replicate that in Australia, but that's, again, what must be such a great energy about being in those bigger cities, and I think is what is like inspiring to people when they think about moving, you know, to whether it is a London or a New York or any city, is just like having that like fresh network and pool of people to be inspired by and play with. So I just want to like tack onto that money thing a little bit. Like, I want to hear you guys' advice on, you know, someone who's potentially thinking about moving to a new city, and you guys living through that and planning for it. Like, did you have a plan, like, financially, of like a certain amount that you wanted to save before you came across and made the move, or did you think like, I'm just gonna go with not much and like commit to trying to find work in terms of like having some income? Was that like a drive, or what's your advice for guys, you know, to thinking about moving, like, you know, in terms of getting their, you know, a little nest egg together before they go? Is that a good idea?
Definitely.
Joel, I don't know if it's like,
yeah, I think so. A danger I see few people fall into is they'll arrive in a new city, and without that nest egg, it's like immediately you've got to pay the rent, you've got to pay the bills, and the first point of call is just, you know, just finding a job, which is, you know, for a lot of people, like maybe bar work or office job, or, you know, whatever they can find. And the danger there is that then prevents you getting out and doing what you originally intended to do. You know, I know a couple of people who, they're doing that kind of bar work, and then that meant turning down gigs, or it meant turning down, you know, going out and hanging out with people, or going to the jam sessions, and before long, that's kind of your life, you know. So it's can be a little bit dangerous. So definitely helps to have, you know, a little bit of money saved, just to at least get by for, you know, a couple of months, at least, just to pay the rent, pay the bills, you know, allow you to go out and meet people.
Yeah, sure. That's good. A couple of months worth of living expenses to get started. Yeah. Angus, would you say the same thing?
Absolutely. I mean, I would say as well, like, whatever you think is like a good savings is you need more. Like, you know, I had, like, I would say, like, a pretty significant nest egg after, you know, saving for like a couple of years back home, and then that went in like 3 months. Also, if you're moving from Australia, halve it, basically. Whatever you have in savings is not not really worth that much. So and then it's like the reality moving back, I was like, oh great, I have all these savings. I'm just going to go shed and go to gigs and play sessions, and that's awesome if you can do that for a bit, but it does take a long time to get work consistently. So, like trying to, you got to put a deposit down on a place, you got to pay a broker fee, you got to do all this type of stuff, which suddenly that's like $10,000, and like, wow, okay, that was hard. So, whatever people like, I would say you need a significant, or at least you need a significant amount of savings, or you need to know that you're going to step into the scene and be working straight away, or even have like a teaching job lined up or something lined up because if I was thinking about moving to the city and I didn't know anyone and I, had no contacts, I think you would really need to be having like 6 months of living expenses saved. And that includes, like Joel was saying, that includes going to gigs. Because you rock up in New York and you're trying to meet people. Well, you have to go out, and that costs money.
Sure, yeah, that's a real thing, definitely. Yeah, cool. Well, that's I mean, super valuable insight, because it's something that I think people imagine. That I'm going to need some money, but like, the reality of hearing it from you guys of like, you do have to have like a decent amount, because otherwise, sometimes you're forced into situations where maybe you're doing work you don't necessarily want to do, or like, you were saying, Angus, like maybe playing gigs you don't necessarily want to do just because you have to, that's a whole different thing. So I'm curious then to know, like, now that you've both been there for a while, is there anything about the Australian scene that you like miss in particular, or is there anything that you kind of like long for, or do you feel like you're getting all of the everything you need from being in these places and getting all the drive and motivation that you need? Jolie, I don't know, to start with you.
I mean, Australia's, don't get me wrong, it's got some like incredible musicians, and I really admire those people that make a very good living and working in Australia, especially when those players that can do it internationally as well. I think Australia's still got that potential, especially this day and age, more than anything else. You can you can work for people overseas, whether that's recording or even touring and basing yourself in Australia. I think playing wise, I'm quite fulfilled here.
Great.
I miss playing with a bunch of players back home. Those people I've grew up with and really admire. So, but there's new people I've also met here and really respect and have a lot of fun playing with as well.
So. Sure. Yeah, Angus.
Yeah, very similar to Joel. Like I miss people that I played with a lot back home, obviously, but I don't really miss the scene as much. I miss Australia for the reasons why you would think you would miss Australia. Yeah, there's a beach. It's nice, like stuff like that. But I don't miss the scene as much.
But that's great to hear, because people. Yeah, that is just a sign that you are like happy and you're living the life that you want to live, and you're fulfilled in all of the ways. So that's just more of a really like encouraging, powerful thing, I think, for people to hear, like, because people can get intimidated and put back for whatever reason about moving, because they think they'll miss a whole bunch of stuff. And maybe that was the case in the beginning, maybe the early stages of you guys moving, but now that you've been there for a while, like you get to realize what the reality is of living in the incredible cities that you are, and your focus changes and your priorities change, and you realize that there's this incredible world out there of other musicians and networks that you just wouldn't have been exposed to if you hadn't have made that commitment. So I mean, I guess
sorry, go Ben.
No, go man, go.
As a good thing to remember is like Australia isn't going anywhere. Like if you don't like it, and it doesn't work out, then that's fine. Like you can easily step back into a scene that you've already been in. You know, well, not as easily, but it's you're not starting from scratch back home.
It's there.
So
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Great, man. I want to wrap it up. I respect you guys' time, and thank you again for making this time work that we can all chat together. I'm super happy. But to wrap it up, like, what's the one thing that you wish you knew before you moved, or like, what's just one piece of advice that you can pass on to someone who's thinking about making the move, but they're not really sure if it's going to be worth it, and maybe needs that little bit of encouragement, just something to kind of finish up on. Jolie, maybe you start with
well, whenever I think about moving here, and like my first thought, my only regret in a way is that I didn't do it sooner. Because it's just such a daunting prospect when you think about it, especially coming from a smaller town to a bigger town, because you think everything is going to be on the next scale. I think in Australia you get drilled into a little bit that you think you're good now, wait until you go to a bigger scene, you're going to be nothing. And I think the reality is, it's like, if you've done your homework right, you can compete with well, not compete, but you can you can hold your own, and you can you can keep up with a scene in another city. But if for anything, it's just like a personal motivation to see where you might stand, or something to like, if it doesn't work, as Angus said, you can always come back. It's not a failure, because if anything, you kind of know what you need to work on, and you know where you might need to focus more. So I mean, it's all just a learning curve, really. Everyone is in the same boat. Everyone's
awesome, man.
Playing music because they want to learn, they want to progress, and majority of people you meet think like-minded. They think the same way. They just want to make good music. They just want to enjoy being creative and playing good music. So if you can kind of experience a little bit of that, even though it's a bit scary to begin with, then absolutely you're going to develop and improve by doing that.
Yeah, man, that's great. Awesome. Thank you. Angus, maybe?
Yeah, my biggest piece of advice would be like not being afraid of kind of putting yourself out there and being like aware of your skill sets, because like the hustle. I really that was something that I did not think about at all, and it is like a skill, and it's like something you have to learn. So I guess being prepared to kind of be confident not only in your playing, but in the way that you can communicate with people, and putting yourself out there like that, and also just to kind of go back to Joel's point about like going back home. It won't be a failure at all, because it's still like people. You'd be surprised at how much people listen with their eyes sometimes, and they'll be like, "Wow, Joel's just returned. He lived in London. Whoa!" Like it's you've got this, but it's like you've still. I think that's still unfortunately. Maybe it's not like the best thing, but it still kind of exists back home. So it's always, I would say, just take the risk, because you will be a better musician for it. That's one thing that will be guaranteed. If you kind of move to a bigger city, there's you're not going to become worse at your instrument. That's for sure.
That's very true. Very true. You're going to learn something either way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. Wow. Thank you guys again for taking the time to chat today. This has been so cool. And I know there's a lot of drummers out there and musicians who are going to get a lot of hearing both of your perspectives and hopefully be inspired to potentially, make the move to a new city or get a bit more perspective on what the realities of that are like. And again, huge respect for you guys for doing it, and you're living that that life now, and I know kind of where we all came from, and remember the practice rooms that we all used to kind of share in high school, and the bands we used to play with. So yeah, we got a lot of history there. But to see like where you guys are at now is like, yeah, like I said, super inspiring. So, yeah, we'll finish up. Like, where can people find and follow you? Like, you know, whether that's social media or website or any, you know, personal projects coming out, like Jolie, maybe, yeah, let us know.
Yeah, you can follow my website, just joelprime.com, or I think on Instagram I am joelprimemusic. Otherwise, yeah, I can kind of list a few of the things that I'm up to on my website, just sort of updating that at the moment. But
great,
I'll start adding more content there.
Awesome. Angus?
I don't have a website up yet.
Yeah.
But you can find me on Instagram. My Instagram is Angus Mason Plays the Drums. I'm just double checking that.
I do play the drums, yes.
Yeah. And on YouTube, just Angus Mason.
Oh, awesome.
So yeah.
Cool. Man, okay. You guys are absolute legends. Thank you again. And I really, really hope we can do this again in person, hopefully next time. That would be
absolutely
amazing.
Awesome.
But yeah, well, yeah, thank you guys. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your day. We'll speak soon.
Thanks so much, Ben. See you, Joel.
See you, Angus.